The figure of the father always leave a mark, and until you understand that mark, you will be bound to it. Hi, today in this video I will talk about and make you understand why you will never be able to heal while you do not look at the relationship you built or were forced to build with your father. Doesn't matter whether he was present or was not present with you in your childhood till date, or he was loving or non loving, caring or non caring, you will have that mark on your personality of your father. Have you ever wondered why certain feelings won't leave you alone, no matter how much you try to ignore them? Why do you feel a guilt that you won't don't know the source of? A constant fear of not being enough, or an inexplicable anger towards authority figures? Perhaps you think all of this is a result of your current circumstances, your job, your relationship, your daily struggles. But I'm going to tell you an uncomfortable truth. What traps you today did not originate in the present. It was planted a long time ago, in the early relationship that shaped your psyche. And above all, it has deep roots in the relationship you had or did not have with your father or father figure. Sigmund Freud, the Austrian neurologist and recognized founder of psychoanalysis, spent his life studying how unconscious forces shape your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And he left us a warning that many still ignore. The figure of the father is one of the most powerful archetypes in the human unconscious. The way you saw, felt, and interpreted the presence or absence of your father when you were a child, even if you don't consciously remember any of it, continues to command your life to this day. You may think you have overcome it, that what's in the past is in the past, but your body tells another story. Your behavior tells another story. Look honestly. How many times have you felt a desperate need to please others, even when it hurts you? How many times have you felt like an imposter, unable to recognize your own worth? How many times have you sabotaged yourself before even trying, taken over by an inner voice that said, "You are not good enough"? How many times have you bent to bosses, authorities, or partners as if you were that same child trying to avoid your father's disapproval? And don't be fooled. It doesn't matter if your father was present or absent, loving or strict, violent or overly permissive, the impact is there. An absent father creates a void that you try to fill your whole life. An authoritarian father creates an internal critic that never shuts up. A weak or submissive father may launch you into an incessant search for protective figures, or conversely, lead you to an automatic disdain for anyone who tries to guide you. There is no neutrality here. The figure of the father always leaves a mark, and until you understand that mark, you will be bound to it. Freud taught us that his influence goes beyond the personal. The paternal figure also shapes culture. In his works, Totem and Taboo and Civilization and its Discontents, he shows how the fear, guilt, and repression inherited from the primordial father are forces that sustain the social institutions that govern our lives. But before transforming the world outside, you need to confront your internal world. Today, you will understand why you will never be able to heal while you do not look at the relationship you built or were forced to build with your father. And I'm not talking about a superficial look. I'm talking about diving into the depths of your unconscious and bringing to light what you have repressed. It's a hard process, yes, but it is the only one that can truly set you free. Most people believe that their problems begin in adulthood, a toxic relationship, a frustrating job, a personal failure. But that's not how it works. Psychoanalysis shows that the deepest conflicts of the psyche are formed long before you become aware of the world. And the most powerful of all these conflicts has a name you may have heard but never truly understood: the Oedipus complex. Freud described the Oedipus complex in detail in three essays on the theory of sexuality, and his discovery was one of the most uncomfortable in the history of psychology. He showed that between the ages of 3 and 6, you experienced a psychic battle from which you did not emerge. unsatched. During this phase, you begin to form intense emotional bonds with your parents. But what seems like an innocent relationship hides a deep unconscious trauma. You, like every child, wanted to be the center of the universe for your mother to receive all her love and attention. But there was an obstacle your father. He was the invisible rival who monopolized the affection of the maternal figure. And if you don't remember, this generated feelings of rivalry, jealousy, desire, and above all, guilt within you. Unconscious desire of the opposite sex parent, rivalry with the same sex parent, fear of punishment, shame, anxiety. All of this was processed by a child's mind incapable of understanding what was happening. This process is universal with the slight variations. While in boys, this dynamic is known as the Oedipus complex. In girls, Freud described a complementary phenomena, an Electra complex, later developed by Carl Jung. Here, it's the paternal figure that becomes the object of unconscious desire, while the mother is perceived as a rival. Just like in boys, this conflict also generates feelings of guilt, fear, and repression, which becomes shaping forces of the female psyche. And here lies the problem. These conflicts did not disappear, they were repressed, buried in the unconscious. But the emotional energy that accompanied them, fear, guilt, shame, remained there, shaping your psyche as a silent force. You learned that desire was dangerous, that challenging authority figures led to punishment, that love came with guilt. These nonverbal lessons became the foundation of your superego, the part of the mind that watches, judges, and punishes your own thoughts and behaviors. Now think, how many times have you self censored for no apparent reason? How many times have you felt conflicted about wanting something good for yourself? How many times have you remained silent in front of someone stronger even when you knew you were right? All of this is echoes of the original trauma. For example, you are the person who cannot sustain a healthy relationship because you always feel inferior or unworthy of love. Or, on the contrary, you become excessively controlling and jealous, trying to ensure that you will never be replaced or rejected, exactly as you feared would happen in childhood. Or perhaps you are someone who diminishes yourself in professional environments with an unconscious fear of competing with male authority figures. All of this is the Oedipus complex in action. And what is more cruel, since conscious memory does not reach this phase, you grow up believing that these feelings are part of who you are, but they are not. They are fragments of an unconscious battle that was never resolved. And as long as you do not bring this to light, you will continue to fight wars you don't even know you are waging. The Oedipus and Electra complexes are just the beginning. Prepare to look at the part of your mind that you have never dared to face. Few people understand what happens after the Oedipus and Electra complex is repressed. It is at this moment that the figure of the father ceases to be just an external rival and begins to inhabit your internal world. The unconscious, unable to cope with the intensity of these conflicting feelings, desire, rivalry, fear, finds an outlet. It internalizes the paternal figure, and it's here that the paternal complex is born. Freud described in The Ego and the ID how this internalization forms the basis of the superego, the psychic instance that acts as an underlying judge within you. Your father, or rather, the image you have constructed of him, comes to reside in your mind. From there, he begins to watch over you, to judge you, to punish you. To you might think, but I didn't even have such a significant relationship with my father. It doesn't matter. Sometimes, the more absent he was, the more powerful the image you created to fill the void. The psyche does not tolerate gaps. When the father is absent, you idealize. When the father is violent, you defend yourself by creating a cruel superego that anticipates punishment. When the father is weak, you internalize the feeling that the world has no protection. of any of these scenarios, the child does not process the real father. She creates a psychic father and it's with him, and that you continue to dialogue to this day. Now, see how manifests in your life. You enter a relationship and without realizing it, feel that you need to please the other person at all costs. You can't say no. The fear being abandoned. You act as if you are still seeking approval from your father, or you are opposite, unable to submit, challenging every figure of authority, bosses, leaders, partners, because deep down you are trying to win the battle you could not win against your father in childhood. Perhaps you are someone who lives with a critical voice inside your head, telling you that you are never enough. No matter how much you achieve, you always feel like an imposter. This is the superego, the ghost of the internalized father that continues to punish you because you learn to associate love and recognition with an internal need to please. In deeper cases, the paternal complex manifests in entire life choices. You may avoid leadership positions for fear of becoming like the rejecting father, or compulsively seek success just to prove to an imaginary father that you are worthy. All of this happens because, as Freud showed, the child's psyche does not simply know how to overcome such a deep conflict. It represses it and transforms it into automatic patterns. But what has not been resolved repeats itself. And this is where we arrive at one of the most cruel mechanisms of the unconscious: compulsive repetition. You do not just carry the paternal complex, you relive it day after day, attracting into your life the same dynamics that feed it. And until you understand this cycle, you will be doomed to repeat it. In the next part, we will dive into the phenomena. You will understand why, even when you try to change, you always end up falling into the same patterns, in the same relationship, in the same work conflicts, in the same feelings of inadequacy. If this content is making sense to you, please click the subscribe button now and subscribe to my channel so that I keep getting the motivation to make such videos. Thanks. Let's continue. Now you know there is an internalized father figure within you, a psychic model that dictates how you feel and react in the world. But understanding this is still not enough. There is an even more mechanism that keeps these patterns active in your life. An invisible cycle that forces you to repeat the same drama, always with different characters. Freud called this compulsive repetition one of the most important concepts he developed in the remembering, repeating, and working through. Understand this. The unconscious does not just seek to hide what is painful, it seeks to elaborate. It tries automatically to resolve what has been left pending. But since you do not have conscious access to these original wounds, what happens is the following. You recreate situations that echo the unresolved childhood trauma, relationships, experiences, emotional patterns. Like a scratched record, you repeat the same scripts, hoping unconsciously that this time the ending will be different. Want an example? You enter a romantic relationship and without realizing it, choose someone who treats you with coldness or indifference. Exactly how you felt in front of an emotionally distant father. Deep down, your psyche is trying to ensure that this time you receive the love you did not get in childhood. But the unconscious choice almost always leads to the same outcome: frustration and pain, or you seek authoritarian, controlling partners. Unconsciously, you relive the relationship with a strict father trying to break free from submission or seeking approval. But the wounded child that still resides in your unconscious continues to react in the same way: fear, guilt, self annihilation. In the professional environment, you avoid standing out because you feel you do not deserve recognition, an echo of the internal judgment shaped by a critical father, or on the contrary, you become a compulsive perfectionist, obsessed with proving your worth to an inner father who is never satisfied. Even when you rebel, the cycle continues. That person who cannot stand authority figures, who needs to challenge bosses, who sabotages relationships whenever they feel someone has power over them, is actually still fighting against the childhood. But as long as you do not recognize this root, You will continue to repeat the same drama under new masks. And the cruelest part is that you more you try to avoid certain feelings or situations, the closer you get to them. Because what is repressed, as Freud showed, does not disappear, it returns. It returns disguised, it returns in your patterns of choice, in your automatic reactions, in your emotional symptoms. You can change cities, partners, jobs, you can cut ties with family, but if you do not look within, you will end up finding the same script in the new guises. Because it's not the external world that needs to change, it is the unconscious programming that needs to be redefined. Now, you might be wondering, am I doomed to repeat this forever? No. But the way out is not simple. It's not about thinking positive or changing your attitude. It's a deep work that requires confronting these hidden forces, making them conscious, and gradually unraveling the cycle. Let's understand how the figure of the father has been methodized to sustain the social order and how this further reinforces the psyche you need to break. If you have made this far, you have already understood. The figure of the father does not only live in the personal history, it lives in the very structure of the society you are part of. And to understand why it's so difficult to break free from these patterns, you need to see that they are not just yours, they are collective. Freud was one of the first to point out this out clearly in Totem and Taboo, later in Civilization and its discontents. He showed that the archetype of the father or the primordial father was the great symbolic pillar upon which civilization was built. Imagine the first human tribes. The father was not just a parent, he was the absolute leader, the owner of the woman, the holder of the power, the myth of the mother of the primordial father. Described by Freud, reveals how the descendants, consumed by guilt after destroying the paternal figure, created the first moral and religious rules to contain their own impulses. From the emerged the taboo, the law, the totem. Civilization, according to Freud, was born from collective guilt regarding the figure of the father. But do not be mistaken. This drama is not just historical, it repeats itself in every generation. The figure of the father has been sacralized by culture. The paternal archetype has been incorporated into institutions. God, the father in the religion, the supreme leader in the state, the unquestionable chief in the organizations. Everywhere you find representations of the father that demand obedience, impose limits, and promise punishment if you dare to transgress. This is why you feel guilt when you rebel. That is why you fear standing out too much, challenging the order, following your own path. It's not just your individual superego that controls you, it's a cultural superego fed by centuries of symbolic construction. You have been shaped to obey. Since childhood, school teaches you to respect hierarchy, to accept the evaluation of authority figures as a measure of your worth. Religion reinforces the idea of omniscient father who watches your thoughts and punishes your transgressions. The legal system repeats this pattern in its vertical and punitive structures. Even in the most intimate relationship, this conditioning appears. You freeze in front of charismatic figure. You seek compulsive approval in emotional relationship. All of this because society constantly reinforces the internal structures that were born from paternal complex. Liberation is not just an individual process. It's a process that requires questioning the cultural narratives that taught you that obedience is a supreme virtue. But for that, you first need to look within and start dismantling one by one the beliefs and patterns you carry. Now, you must be wondering, how do I start to free myself from this cycle? Awareness is the first step, but it's not enough. The healing work requires more than reflection, it requires practice, it requires method. In the next part, we will explore concrete strategies so that you can, for the first time, confront this invisible legacy. If what you are hearing resonates with you, you will find real value in this video. It is possible to break such an old, deeply rooted pattern. The answer is yes. But the path is not simple. It's not enough to read a book or repeat positive phrases in front of the mirror. You need to confront your unconscious. And this requires work, courage, and a methodical process. The first step is awareness. What you do not recognize control you. What you bring to light begins to lose power. Therefore, the simple fact that you are here reflecting on these issues is already a moment of rapture. But initial awareness is just the beginning. The mind is skilled at creating defenses. Even after you identify certain patterns, the impulse to repeat them persists. Why? Because for years or decades you believed that these patterns were you. They become confused with your identity. Therefore, the second step is constant observation. You need to become an investigator of your own emotional life. Start mapping your automatic reactions. When do you feel excessively guilty? When do you submit without questioning? When do you feel disappropriation, anger towards authority figures? When do you realize you are compulsively seeking approval? Do not rationalize, observe. Write, make these patterns visible. A practical example. Imagine that you notice that in all your romantic relationship you end up choosing partners who criticize or invalidate you. Instead of just suffering, ask yourself, what is the voice behind this dynamic? Is it the voice of the father or an internalized paternal figure that said I was never good enough? When you manage to connect a current pattern to an unconscious root, you begin to resolve the power it has over you. But there comes a point where self observation is not enough because you cannot see alone everything that is in the unconscious. And this is where third step comes in, and perhaps the most important, a deep therapeutic approach oriented towards the dynamics of the unconscious is fundamental in this process. It's not about superficially talking about your problems, it's about exploring with a qualified therapist the deeper layer of your psyche, bringing to consciousness what has been repressed, working through unresolved conflicts, re-signifying the internalized paternal image. Therapy allows you to gradually recognize that the critical voice that paralyzes you is not your voice. That is the fear of taking a stand is not your fear, but an inherited fear. That the compulsion to repeat destructive relationship is an old script that you can finally rewrite. And here is a practical piece of advice. Choose a therapist who understands these dynamics. Not all therapies is the same. Seek an approach that recognizes the role of the unconscious, such as psychoanalysis or deep psychodynamic therapies. Prepare for a process that will not be quick or easy, but it will be transformative. In addition to therapy, some complementary practices can help. Reflective writing, for example, is a powerful tool for bringing repressed emotions to the surface. Mindful meditation can help. Observe your internal states without judgment. But nothing replaces deep therapeutic work. We have reached the crucial point of this journey. Now you understand what you compulsively repeat, what paralyzes you, sabotages you, generates anxiety or guilt is not a simple personality trait. It's not a flaw of yours, it's the result of an old trauma. The figure of your father, whoever he may be, however he may have been, shaped your unconscious. If you do not look at this truth, you will be condemned to repeat for your entire life patterns that you did not consciously choose. This is not a metaphor, this is a psychic fact. But here comes the good news. You do not have to be the prisoner of your history. Psychoanalysis shows us that what has been repressed can be worked through, that the unconscious is not an internal prison, it's a space that can be illuminated. The process is demanding, it is deep, it involves pain. Yes, but it also offers the rarest and most valuable possibility that a human being can achieve: inner freedom. Freedom does not mean no longer having problems, it means being able to make choices that are truly yours and not automatic repetitions of an oppressed past. It means recognizing when you are being dominated by old scripts and consciously choosing new paths. And this requires a commitment of self knowledge, and a therapeutic process to facing your shadows. Do not expect quick solutions. No real transformation happens overnight, but every step you take toward this awareness already begins to break the cycle. Now, I want you to invite you to a first act of freedom. Write in the comments what resonated with you the most in this video. What pattern do you notice you have been repeating? What insight did you have about your own story? The simple act of naming is already an important step in the healing process. And do not stop here. If you really want to walk this path of liberation, keep watching my next videos as well. Thank you so much for your time.